There is a moment in every person's life that splits their timeline in two, before it and after it. For most people, that moment comes without warning. It doesn't knock on the door politely. It doesn't give you time to prepare or say goodbye to the life you had built. It arrives like a storm in the middle of the night, and by morning, everything you thought was permanent is gone. Your job, gone. Your money, gone. Your reputation, gone. The people you thought would never leave, gone. And you are left standing in the rubble of something that used to be your life, asking the only question that makes any sense in that moment: what do I do now? Most people never get a real answer to that question. They spend years, sometimes the rest of their lives, trying to rebuild the exact same structure that fell apart, using the same foundation, the same materials, the same blueprint. And it falls again. But then there are the rare few, the ones who look down at the rubble beneath their feet and realize something that changes everything. They realize, this is not destruction. This is a clearing. This is the story of one of those people. His name was Marcus, and the day he lost everything, truly, completely, devastatingly lost everything, turned out to be the greatest gift life ever gave him. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you may never look at your own hardship the same way again.
To understand what Marcus lost, you first have to understand what he had. By the age of 37, Marcus had built what most people would call a perfect life. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense, but perfect in the modern, carefully curated sense that we are all taught to chase. He had a high-paying corporate job as a regional sales director for a large manufacturing company. He drove a car that turned heads at traffic lights. He lived in a house that was too big for two people, but exactly the right size for the image he wanted to project. He had a wife, beautiful, smart, patient, and a young daughter named Lily, who was 7 years old and had her father's eyes. On paper, Marcus was winning. But paper doesn't tell you everything. What the paper didn't say was that Marcus had been running for years, not towards something, but away from something. Away from the quiet voice inside him that kept whispering in the early hours of the morning when everything was still that this was not his life. Not really. It was a performance, a costume he had been wearing since his mid-20s, when his father, a strict, proud man who measured success in salary figures and square footage, had looked at him across a dinner table and said words that Marcus never forgot. A man who can't provide is not a man at all. Marcus had spent the next 12 years proving his father wrong, or proving him right. He was never quite sure which one. He worked 18-hour days. He missed Lily's first steps. He missed school plays and birthday dinners and quiet Sunday mornings. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he was doing it for them. He told his wife, Sarah, that once he made it to the top, once the number in the bank account hit a certain figure, then they would slow down. Then they would have time. Sarah had heard this promise so many times it had stopped meaning anything. She didn't say that out loud. She was kind. She was patient. But silence has a weight to it. And Marcus, for all his intelligence, had stopped paying attention to the heaviest things in his home. He was too busy running.
It started on a Tuesday. The most devastating days always seem to start on a Tuesday. There's something cruelly ordinary about it. Mondays you expect to be hard, but Tuesday feels like the world owes you something calm, something predictable. Marcus was in a meeting when his phone buzzed on the conference table. He ignored it, then it buzzed again and again. He glanced down. It was his company's CEO. He excused himself from the room and took the call on the hallway. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. By the end of it, Marcus learned that the company had been acquired overnight by a larger competitor. The acquisition had been in secret negotiations for 6 months. His entire division was being dissolved. His position, along with 43 others, was being eliminated, effective immediately. He was to return his laptop and his corporate credit card to HR by end of day. 12 years, gone in 4 minutes. Marcus drove home that afternoon feeling a strange floating numbness, the kind your brain produces when reality is too large to process all at once. He sat in his driveway for 40 minutes before he could make himself go inside. When he walked through the door, Sarah was in the kitchen. She looked at his face and she knew, without a single word, that something had broken. She crossed the room and held him. He didn't cry. He couldn't. It was too fresh, like a wound so deep that the nerves haven't started firing yet. He told her everything. She listened. She said they would figure it out together. For 3 weeks, Marcus believed her. He polished his resume, he sent applications, he made calls. He had contacts. He had 12 years of experience. Surely this would resolve itself quickly. But the months that followed were not kind. The job market was difficult. His industry had contracted sharply. His interviews led to second interviews, then silence. The savings they had, which looked impressive on a bank statement but were quietly leveraged against a mortgage that had always been slightly too big, began to shrink. Fast. 6 months in, they had to sell the car. 8 months in, they listed the house. 10 months in, Marcus was sitting at a kitchen table in a 2-bedroom apartment, looking at a bank balance that had 4 digits in it, listening to his daughter singing in the next room, and feeling something he had never once felt in his adult life. Completely, totally, unmistakably lost. The man who had been so certain about everything, about the path, about the plan, about what success looked like and how long it would take to get there, had absolutely no idea what to do next. And then the final blow came. Sarah sat across from him one evening after Lily was in bed, and she placed her hands flat on the table between them, the way people do when they are about to say something they've been rehearsing for a very long time, and she said, quietly, without anger, without drama, "Marcus, I have loved you through everything, but I have been alone in this marriage for 7 years, and I am too tired to keep waiting for you to come home, not to this apartment, but to me." She moved out 3 weeks later. Marcus was 38 years old, no job, no house, no car, no marriage, and a daughter who spent half her weeks on the other side of the city. This was his rock bottom. This, right here, was the floor.
What most people don't tell you about rock bottom is what it actually feels like to be there. They tell you about the before, they tell you about the triumphant after, but the during, the actual experience of sitting in the rubble of your life with nowhere to go and no map to follow, that part gets skipped over, wrapped up in a sentence like, "It was a dark time," and moved past quickly, as if darkness itself is too uncomfortable to look at directly. But the darkness is where everything important happens. Marcus spent 2 weeks barely leaving his apartment. He ate poorly, he slept at strange hours, he stared at his phone but called almost nobody, because the thought of explaining where his life had landed was more than he could bear. He thought about his father's words, "A man who can't provide is not a man at all." They felt less like a memory now and more like a verdict. He thought about the years he had spent building, the endless, grinding, sacrificial building, and how it had amounted to this, a 2-bedroom apartment and a silence so complete he could hear the refrigerator humming from the bedroom. And then, on a Thursday evening in the 3rd week, something unexpected happened. Lily called him. She was at Sarah's. It was past her bedtime. She had snuck her mother's phone to call him, which she was not supposed to do, and her small voice came through the speaker like light coming under a door. "Daddy, are you okay? Mommy says you're sad." Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. "I'm okay, baby," he said. "I made you a drawing today," she said. "It's of us at the park. Can I bring it on Saturday?" "Of course," he said. "I can't wait to see it." There was a pause. Then, "Daddy, I love you even when things are hard." He didn't speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was not the voice of a regional sales director. It was not the voice of a man performing success.
It was smaller than that, more honest than that. I love you too, Lily, more than you'll ever know. After he hung up, Marcus sat in the dark for a long time. And then, slowly, quietly, without fanfare, something inside him shifted. Not fixed, not healed, not suddenly clear, just shifted. Like a door long locked, opening the smallest amount, just enough to let in a single thread of light.
On a Friday morning, 3 days after Lily's call, Marcus woke up at 6 a.m., not because an alarm told him to, not because he had somewhere to be. He woke up because something inside him was finally quiet enough to hear itself think. He sat at the kitchen table with a blank notebook and a cup of coffee, and for the first time in 12 years, he asked himself a question he had never allowed himself to ask. What do I actually want? Not what his father wanted, not what the market wanted, not what the LinkedIn version of himself was supposed to want. What did he, Marcus, actually want? He sat with that question for a long time, and then he started to write. The first thing he wrote was the word build. He had always loved building things. As a teenager, he used to disappear into the garage for hours making furniture out of scrap wood. He was good at it. Not famous good, not rich good, just good. And it had made him feel like himself. The second thing he wrote was the word people. He genuinely loved helping people solve problems. Not in the corporate way where helping people was a means to a quarterly target, but in the real way. The way where you sit with someone and listen and help them find the thing they already knew but could not say out loud. He stared at those two words for a long time. Build. People. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have capital. He didn't have a brand or a platform or a 5-year strategy. He had a notebook, 2 words, and a slowly cooling cup of coffee. And he decided that was enough to begin. He enrolled in a part-time woodworking class that cost $40 a month. He started building small pieces in the corner of his rented apartment, a shelf, a side table, a small wooden box, and he started a blog, anonymous at first, no name, no face, just honest writing about what it felt like to lose everything and try to rebuild. The writing was raw. It was not polished. It was not strategic. It was just true. Within 3 months, the blog had 17,000 readers. People were writing to him, real people, people who had lost jobs, marriages, homes, people who felt the same quiet shame Marcus had felt sitting in that cold apartment. He wasn't famous, he wasn't rich, but for the first time in years, he felt real. And then something unexpected happened. People started asking him for advice, not woodworking advice, life advice, career advice. How do you start over? How do you figure out what you actually want? Marcus realized something important. He had spent 12 years selling things he didn't believe in to people who didn't need them. What if he spent the next 12 years helping people find the thing they actually wanted? He started offering one-on-one sessions, informal at first, just conversations, but people kept coming back, and they kept sending others. And slowly, without a business plan or an investor or a single dollar of funding, Marcus built something real. 3 years later, Marcus did not have the life he had lost. He had something better. Not bigger, not louder, better. He ran a small workshop out of a rented space on the edge of town. 2 part-time employees, a waiting list. His pieces had been featured in 3 design publications, not because he chased them, but because the work was honest and people noticed. The blog had become a podcast, hundreds of thousands of people listening every week, not to a performance, to a man who had lost everything and decided to tell the truth about it. He co-parented Lily with Sarah. It was not the family he had imagined, but it was real. And Lily thrived. She was 10 now. She came to the workshop on Saturdays. She had her own small workbench in the corner. She made things, she broke things, she fixed them, and she laughed in a way that made the whole workshop feel like the most important place on earth. Marcus was not the man his father had wanted him to be. He was not the man his company had needed him to be. He was not the man his younger self had been afraid not to be. He was just Marcus, a man who built things with his hands and helped people find what they were looking for. A man who had lost everything and discovered that everything he needed had been inside him all along. He drove a modest car. He lived in a modest home. He woke up every morning without dread. And some mornings, not all of them, but some, he sat at the kitchen table with his coffee and his notebook, and he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Grateful. Not for the fall, not exactly, but for what the fall had cleared away, for the life that had been waiting underneath.
I want to stop for a moment. Not to motivate you, not to inspire you, just to tell you something true. You watched this entire story today. You stayed. People don't stay for stories that mean nothing. Something in Marcus's story is living in you right now. Maybe it has a name. Maybe it doesn't yet. It could be the job you fear leaving, the quiet marriage, the version of yourself buried under someone else's definition of success. Whatever it is, it's real, and it deserves to be heard. 3 things Marcus's story taught me. 1. Rock bottom isn't punishment, it's correction. The life that collapsed was a costume, and costumes are meant to come off. 2. The real you has never left. It's been waiting patiently under everything you built, waiting for the noise to stop, waiting for you to sit at a kitchen table with a blank notebook and ask, what do I actually want? 3. The most dangerous thing you can do right now is nothing. Inside you, right now, there is a more honest, more alive version of your life waiting. Before you go, one thing. Not a subscribe button, not a like. 60 seconds of complete silence. Then ask yourself, what do I actually want? Write it down, even one word. That answer is the beginning of everything. If this story reached something in you, this channel exists for you. Every week we bring one honest, deeply human story about falling completely and rising from what was supposed to break you. No performance, no shortcuts, no noise, just truth. Subscribe. Stay with us. Your story is not over. Keep rising.